Hello and welcome to Wellness by Design today. I'm Jane Hogan, your host, the wellness engineer. And today I am welcoming Tricia Nelson, and we are talking about emotional eating. And she is the queen of helping people get over their emotions so that they're not eating recklessly. So, welcome to Wellness by Design, Tricia.
Thank you for having me. I love that term, eating recklessly. I've done a lot of that.
I think everyone has, right? Sometimes we don't even realize, oh my goodness, I've eaten like the whole sleeve of cookies
Yeah,
instead of
you're right.
whatever. I'm not there anymore. I'm pretty like on top of it, but I know a lot of people, they're really, really struggling with it. And obviously you did too. So what is it that made you so passionate about this subject in particular?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it was definitely my own pain around this that has driven my passion and drives it today because I don't ever want to return there. I grew up as what I like to affectionately call a fat girl. I was a chubby kid, and it was really painful for me because my mother. This is awful. So my mother at one time, I really like clothes and I always liked clothes. And so my mother took me shopping, and there was a lot, I was fat and not, sometimes I look back and I wasn't. So I went up and down even as a kid. But there was a clothing line called Chubettes. And my mother's like, "Oh, look at this. Let's choose something from here." And I said, "Mom, no. Like, absolutely not. I am never wearing a piece of clothing called Chubettes." Is that awful? It's so I can't even believe they did that. So anyway, so that was a hard no for me. But the point is, I needed something because I didn't fit in the regular clothes, and that was a really like painful experience for me to not be the same size as my friends, to be chosen last on the teams, to feel like I wasn't popular with boys. It was just a really sore spot for me. And about fourth grade, I started, actually my oldest sister, who is also an emotional eater, she like taught me how to binge. Like, I didn't know what binging was, even though I had done it before, but she, like, this was a deliberate go to Friendly's ice cream. I grew up in the Northeast of the US. And so they have these stores that are kind of like Denny's, and it's called Friendly's, and ice cream shop and sandwich shop. And so we went there and we each bought a pint of orange sherbet ice cream, like, and we each got a spoon. And so this is the first time I realized you could do such, I didn't know you could do this, even though I had overeaten before, and felt sick. In fact, I used to get sick to my stomach sometimes on the weekends because I ate so much. But this is a deliberate go get something that you will eat a lot of. And so we did this. We sat, on a bench and each ate a pint of yogurt or of sherbet. So point is, I have this long history with eating, binge eating. It progressed into, spending a Friday night with, my favorite, like, ice cream, cookies, chips, because you have to have the salty with the sweet. So that whole thing, and having like an all out binge, feeling sick. I did try to be bulimic. That didn't work out for me. I wasn't able. I had just mentioned being sick to my stomach. That was involuntary, vomiting when my
Hmm.
stomach was very weak, I guess. And I had spent the whole weekend eating. That was involuntary. And then I tried to voluntarily vomit and wasn't able to do that. So I would just pack on pounds from my eating. And by age 21, I was 50 pounds overweight. And it was very painful for me. And then I began the rounds of the diets, this diet, that diet, this exercise program, that exercise program. And I could lose a little bit of weight here and there. Excuse me. But what I share in my TEDx talk, which I start out talking about, binging and throwing out the remains and the garbage and then going and getting it out of the garbage, like the cookies are in there. Later, when you aren't as stuffed, you go back and get them. So I call it garbage eating. So I talk about that in my TEDx talk. And so I basically, could lose weight. But in my talk, I also talk about having, first of all, many sizes of clothes in the closet because I was a yo-yo dieter. But what's most important is that I could lose weight for a period, like for maybe 2 weeks or so. Because when you're on that new diet, you're like, woo, doing it, I'm all
Yeah.
excited. You got this, this force behind you. But then things get hard, and then it's like a slog. And then you're like, I just want my food back. Like, I want the yummy foods. And so what's really important for me is that, like, why did it get hard? What is that about? Like, why do you no longer have that excitement about it? Why is it a slog? And why is it impossible to keep up? Why is it not sustainable? And to me, that's the emotional eating piece, is when we can't keep it going because diets take away our favorite ooey gooey chewy foods, but
Mhm.
diets don't give us something to replace that with. They don't give us a way to cope with life when life gets stressful. And we don't realize that we don't just like food, which is what I always believed. I just like food. I'm not an emotional eater. But, what I finally came to understand is that I used food for emotional reasons. I used food to get me by and get me through. And
Yeah.
so, and people don't realize that. So that's, to me, that is the crux of it. That's why people don't stay on their diet. That's why people put the weight back on, is because they don't have that understanding and they don't have the tools that can help them deal with the stress instead of using food.
Mm. Gosh, what a story. And uh, those kinds of programs that get written in your subconscious mind, right? Like, not getting picked for the team, and your mother taking you to buy the Chubx or whatever it was called clothes. Those kinds of things, they get lodged in your subconscious mind, and then that then becomes a driver, right, for the emotional eating, among other things, I'm sure. And we've all got a lot of behavioral adaptations we create for whatever emotional triggers are there underneath, right? For some people, like, it might be the eating. For someone else, it might be shopping. For someone else, it
Yeah.
could be drugs or alcohol or gossip or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
Or binge watching television. They're
Totally.
all like ways to escape the pain that's really underlying it all. So I love what you do, because we're all about root causes, right? Let's get at the root cause instead of offering another diet for someone to follow. So so do you talk about it in this way, like healing the root causes
Oh,
of it?
100%. Yeah, the underlying causes, and diets are about the food and the weight. Let's figure out the food plan. Let's figure out the ketones or the, carbs or all this kind of thing. And I find that, the women I coach, they're not stupid. Like, they are very knowledgeable about nutrition and diet and what's good for you and what's not good for you. So it's not a lack of knowledge, nutritional knowledge. Like, they could write a book on it,
Hmm.
as could I have. It's following through on what like, that's the problem. And so, again, that's where the underlying causes come in. It's like, when I feel compelled to eat, when I have this compulsion that feels like a monster inside of me that is growling and snorting and, breathing fire, this monster that I cannot control and just has to be fed. What's that about? Like, that is not, and that supersedes any nutritional know-how. And so
Right.
it's like, what is that monster? And to me, honestly, that compulsion to eat is made up of three things. One is buried emotions. I mean, we tend to go through our day unconscious, just kind of moving through the day. And when we get our feelings hurt, or when we get sad news, or we have that aggravating, continual tension with a family member, that stuff gets buried at the end of the day with food. Most emotional eaters do their worst eating in the afternoon and evening, and so those are the underlying causes. And so, and it can be literally, it doesn't take a lot of work to actually address that. It just takes connecting with our emotional selves, and realizing we have emotional responses to everything, and just getting more conscious. And so, emotional, buried emotions, that I'm talking about, the three things that make up the compulsion:
Hmm.
buried emotions, stress, which is a huge part of our eating, and also habit. Like, it is just an unconscious habit. Like, I'm bored, go look in the refrigerator, right? It's like, I got too much on my plate. Let me get some food to help me get through it. And so the habit part is a big part of it as well. And so, but digging into all three of those things, and understanding, because a lot of the stress is actually self-created, because as emotional eaters, we're really good at creating stress as well. So in my book, I talk about the anatomy of the emotional eater, and this is 24 personality traits that make
Interesting.
up the emotional eater's experience, and or kind of their personality. And because people think emotional eating is just like, I had a bad breakup and I ate Ben and Jerry's ice cream. Like, it's not. That's too surface, or my wonderful grandma, who's no longer with us, used to make these oatmeal cookies, so I want to make oatmeal cookies and eat them. That's way too rudimentary. To me, it's so much more complex than that. And the part that gets overlooked or people don't know is that, and I only know this because I am an emotional eater, and also I've been working with emotional eaters for over 30 years. So what I see is constantly this personality profile, and that those personality traits actually many of them create the stress that leads to stress eating. So let me give you an example of that, because that will help. So the number one trait of an emotional eater is people pleasing. Again, it's a trait that has nothing to do with food and everything to do with why we eat. So as emotional eaters, we tend to draw or seek validation from outside of ourselves. And this goes back, right, a long time. This goes back to our childhood. Many, if not most, of emotional eaters have, some dysfunction, to say the least, in their childhood, if not big T trauma. So as kids, food, like, there wasn't a lot to turn to. So food was there for us. Like, food was there for us. Like, when I was in pain and I had nobody to talk to because I didn't think anybody would understand or believe me, I just stuffed it with food. I just went straight to the food for comfort and for kind of escape, right? And so what happens is it worked as kids, and then we bring that same habit again. It becomes a habit. We bring it into our adulthood. Is just like anything uncomfortable, anything that we don't know how to deal with, we just snuff it out with food. Carbs and sugar, primarily. If fat, sugar, and carbs, these were my three favorite food groups, by the way. But good pastry, donut, whatever. So anyway, so as adults, this people pleasing nature, when you're a kid, so we snuff it out with food, but we also learn to people please as kids, because if you do have dysfunction in your family, if you have a raging alcoholic parent, or you have a violent parent, or an absent parent, or somebody who's hard to get their attention, you learn to people please to try to get your needs met. You don't want somebody beating you up. You better be a people pleaser.
Mhm.
You better know how to scurry around and make sure that, like, we put out that fire by being a good girl. And so, but again, we bring that into our adulthood as well. That becomes a habit as well, the people pleasing. And as adults, we are constantly seeking that validation from outside of ourselves. But the problem with people pleasing is it's not really about pleasing other people. It's about getting that validation, and
Yeah.
we never get it to the extent that we want it. I don't know about anybody else, but nobody was ever as pleased as I had imagined they'd be. Like, I was looking for like a parade or some kind of serenade or something, and people take you for granted. When you're a people pleaser, they're like, give it to her, she'll do it, she always does it, right? She'll always take on the extra work, she'll always say yes. And so we sort of become suckers, where people just know we'll do the job. But then that we grow resentment, right? So people
Yes.
pleasing has a twin, which is resentment. So between knocking ourselves out, trying to do everybody's job, and building a burning cauldron of resentment inside, it's the perfect storm for the I deserve it binge. Like, screw them, they don't appreciate me, I'm going to reward myself, right? And so this is, to me, such a great example of how we create the stress that causes stress eating. Back to the stress part of that
Right.
compulsion to eat, and the good news about that is that we can change that pattern. Like that's not like the compulsion to eat. We create the monster, like we feed the monster. And so to me, that's, the silver lining of that is that we can change our behavior. We can starve that monster, and so that will change our compulsion. That will reduce the cravings. That will help us feel more peaceful in the world where food is no longer our savior.
So interesting, Tricia, because I find with the people that I work with pain, people pleasing is one of the key traits as well. And I think, maybe an early adaptation might be the emotional eating, and then, down the road it may manifest as pain even, right?
Yes.
So it's so interesting, but that you're so right that you have to get back to that initial the root cause, or dealing with those underlying emotions. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to say that the good news is, like, people think, oh, underlying causes, I need 20 years of therapy. And that's not my experience. Like, my experience
no,
is we can start making changes here and now. Like, you don't even have to go back there necessarily, or at least right away. It's like you deal with what's like, let's look right now. Where am I doing other people's job? Like, where am I saying yes, where I should be saying no? There's too much on my plate, which is more true than anybody knows. Like, where can I start making changes in my daily life, which is that's all we have is today.
right.
And it's not that that's easy to do, and we need support and coaching to do that, oftentimes, but it's the here and now. It's practical, it's real. I find it very hard when people are like, oh, you just need to love yourself. Well, I need to know what that means. Like, I need to know how to do that. And to me, boots on the ground, saying no to the invitation, or at least not answering the invitation right away and saying, let me get back to you. Let me check my schedule and get back to you, so I can really start evaluating, can I really afford that amount of energy and stress in my day? Like, do I really have to do that job, or can I delegate this task, or can I, right? Like, where can I schedule time for meditation? Like, this is practical stuff, and I like the practical stuff
Yeah,
because
me too.
it's like, what can I actually do, and which will make a difference? And all that is loving yourself. It translates to self-love,
Yeah.
but it's living our way into right thinking versus thinking our way into right living.
So it's really beginning with, first of all, an awareness, like where am I not setting healthy boundaries, with
Yeah.
people pleasing, and then taking action on that. And so where do you go from there?
I think that's just really important for people who do struggle with food and weight. My experience is if somebody struggles chronically with food and weight, like they've been on several diets, they've, been up and down the scale, they've been a yo-yo person, or they're thin, but they obsess about food. Like, these are all traits of an emotional eater in my experience. And people might not see that right away. So I want to give you a little test that people can do to kind of start to understand the connection between their emotions and their eating, because emotional eating is not, some people know, they're like, oh yeah, I'm an emotional eater, they know right away, but not everybody does. So there's a level of, kind of awareness that needs to be developed. So I like to give people the PEP test, and the PEP test is a way to just realize there is something emotional going on. So PEP is an acronym, and the first P stands for painkiller. So we're used to thinking about what food does to us, but this is what food does for us. Okay, it serves as a painkiller. Like, it's like you're uncomfortable, or you just got bad news, or you're feeling lonely. You eat to kill that pain.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of pain to go around, every single day.
No shortage.
Yeah, exactly. So we eat to just kill the pain, to soften the edges of life. Okay? The E stands for escape. We eat for escape, to check out. And usually we eat to check out from our own brain. because as overeaters, we tend to be overthinkers. Like we are thinking everything to death. What did she mean by that? Why did he look at me that way? Why wasn't I invited? Yada, yada. Like we overthink,
Totally.
I shouldn't have said that. I mean, good God, we just run ourselves ragged with
Yeah.
overthinking,
Or if he
right? And
said this,
so
then I'll say that.
oh
And
my God. I have had so many conversations in the car when I didn't say, again, another trait of the emotional eater is not speaking up, not using our voice. So in the car, I'm like, I should have said this, and here's a good zinger, but it's too late.
yeah.
I'm driving home. Too late. Missed your chance. Right? It's because I was afraid to speak up because I'm a people pleaser. I want people to like me. So anyway, it's a cascading effect. But anyway, the mind is a busy place for the emotional eater. And so we eat to, eat and watch TV. They go together like peanut butter and jelly, and so we eat to just escape our own, fears, worst case scenario thinking, black and white thinking. And the last P in PEP stands for punishment. So we eat to punish ourselves. And this one's a little counterintuitive because we think of eating as a reward, like, oh, it's been a long week. I'm going to get my favorite chocolate, my favorite,
Mhm.
casserole, whatever. But for those who go overboard, and tend to binge and feel sick, and then later the next day you're bloated and you cancel an appointment with girlfriends or whatever, you don't want to play with the kids because you just want to sit on the couch because you feel gross. That's not a reward. Like that's some serious self-abuse with food, and
Mhm.
so it begs the question, like, why would I do that to myself? And I think people do kind of ask the question of us, like, why does she do that when she knows how bad it feels? And my experience is there is part of us that, as overeaters, we tend to overfeel and we feel very guilty about things. And we even own things that aren't even ours to own. Okay. It's just part of how we're made. And low self-esteem certainly plays a part in that as well. Low self-confidence. It's like, oh, it must be my fault. Like everything sticks to us. Must
Yeah.
be my fault, And so we beat ourselves up with food. And food, as much as it is a reward, it is a punishment. It is a form of self-abuse. When we stuff ourselves, when we gain 20 pounds, when we no longer fit in our clothes, we have to wear black stretchy yoga pants everywhere. We can't fit into the cute clothes. And so that to me is part of the overfeeling that we do, feeling guilty. And then when we do something wrong, it's not like we're faultless. When we do make mistakes, we're so hard on ourselves. Like we beat the crap out of
Yeah.
ourselves. So the
Yeah.
guilt part and using food as a form of punishment is part of it too.
Mhm.
So just to recap, the PEP is a PEP test. Like people to sort of wake up to their habits which is a great place to start because the awareness is so vital in the process of
Mhm.
healing. When you find yourself going to the refrigerator time and time again to look and see if any, little elf has put new food in there between, 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock. I don't know what I was expecting when I would just keep looking in the refrigerator. But, when we do that, we can start thinking, like, take the PEP test. Am I looking to kill some pain? Something uncomfortable I don't want to deal with or that happened today? Am I, looking to escape my very busy brain that won't shut off after work? Or, am I feeling bad about something? What is that? How can I address that in a healthy way? So healthy ways would be writing out the pain, like getting your journal. Write, like writing is so cathartic,
It
and
is. I love it.
right? And that's why we don't do it. It's just like, I know I'm going to feel better from this, or I know I'm going to see things that I'm, just happily unaware of. So there is a little bit of, self-awareness, which might be a little uncomfortable, but it's getting it out of your head onto paper. So writing is powerful, doing things to calm your mind, that busy mind, like meditation, breathing exercises, walking, prayer, things that can really settle our head down because we do use food and carbs for that serotonin hit, right? To just sort of calm us down in the moment. At the end of the day, also, it's really important to do things to calm down before you make dinner because my experience is if you take 15, 5, 10, 15 minutes and do even a guided meditation on your phone in your room, before you go into the kitchen, like, calm down, like,
Yeah.
get loose from the spin of the day, and you'll be different in the kitchen. Like, you'll have a different relationship with food if you take that intentional time to unwind in a healthier way.
I think so too, and I think it changes. Like I believe everything's energy, and it's going to change the energy that's going into the food, which is going to change the energy going into you. So
Yes.
really great points, and that little acronym is so PEP is so easy for people to remember. Tricia, I think I just want to mention as well, and just to get your take on this, like how much is the whole fact that we've got a food industry that's got like psychologists and all of this, creating foods to be addictive, plus the ads on TV, the magazines, like all of this stuff. We're just so culturally conditioned, and also the celebrations around food. This is something I found really hard when I was,
Yeah.
I gave up gluten, dairy, and sugar, and then it's someone's birthday at work and the cake comes in. It's hard to, you feel like a party pooper when you're not partaking in that. Um,
Yeah,
so there's a whole lot of other challenges going on
there
too,
are.
besides what
Yep.
might be, your own history and underlying things. What are your thoughts on that?
I find that being in community with other emotional eaters is really, really powerful
Yeah,
because when we are at those parties, our minds are really do a number on us. Like, we think we're the only ones that aren't eating the cake, which is not actually true. Like, not everybody eats cake, but in our minds, we're the only ones, and we're missing out and we're deprived. And so,
right.
and I like to reframe the deprivation narrative, and I'm like, what am I actually depriving myself of if I'm not eating that cake? Which makes me feel bad, which bloats me, which makes me feel addicted. So I'm going to eat more when I get home, which causes zits on my face, which causes, whatever, IBS, So it's like, let's think this through. Like, what am
Let's
I
be a
depriving
good
myself?
reward.
Yeah, like, what am I depriving myself of? I'm depriving myself of feeling crappy, and hating myself. So it's a momentary thing, eating the cake. And so it's important for me to just say, you know what? First of all, I've had plenty of cake in my lifetime. I like to say to people sometimes when I'm at parties, I'm like, no, thank you. I've used up my coupons. Like, I used up my coupons. Like, you guys might have coupons left. I don't. I've done a lot of eating of cake. So I say funny things like that, or sometimes I'll say, no, you don't have enough there for me. So like, they offer me a piece of cake. I never wanted one piece of cake. So, but I do find, in all seriousness, that the being in community with other emotional eaters is a essential part of healing. And so I do all my work in groups, because I find that people who have felt like they were the only ones who couldn't eat cake, or the only ones, or I just felt so strange and different. Like, I just felt like,
Yeah.
my thoughts were different and strange, and my relationship with food was different and strange. So it really helped me to know I wasn't alone, and that there are other people who have this. And also, the healing journey is so much easier when you don't do it alone, and what people don't realize is that food is one of the hardest of the addictive habits to overcome. Overeating,
Because we got
is
to
one of the
eat.
hardest. Exactly. You have to eat. Hello, like, you have to take it out of I say it oftentimes, it's like a tiger. You have to take it out of the cage 3 times a day, pet the kitty, and then get it back inside the cage without getting your backside torn off. And so like, that's not so easy, like, you better have some support with that, right? Because it's a dance. Like, you have to eat without overeating. And this is an addictive habit we've had longer than most other addictions. Alcoholism, usually people start drinking 13, 14, 15 years old. I started eating at like 4 or 5. I was medicating with food. Like, it was
Mhm.
an addiction early in my life, an obsession early in my life, which means I have like more stuff, like more things that I've stuffed, more like less emotional development than your average person when I just started stuffing all my feelings. So it's not, it's a bear, it's a bear, and you better have support. People feel they're so twisted up about needing support with their eating. They're like, oh, it's so stupid. Like, it's just a stupid cookie. It's not heroin in my arm. But the thing is, it is the hardest, in my opinion, to overcome. You have to eat, and you've had it for so long. You've been conditioned for so long, and it's socially acceptable. Like, everybody's pushing it on you, so you better have your tribe. You better have your people who can support you through that. And you also need a step-by-step I needed, and this is what I create for people, the step-by-step process to really address those different levels, like the complexity of it. And people who think they're silly for needing support, that's kind of a process of waking up to the fact that it's more serious than just a cookie fetish, or more serious than just trying to fit into your bikini. Like, it isn't, for many people, it's an addictive habit. And I actually have a quiz on my website, which I told you I would mention, which helps people understand where they are in the continuum of emotional eating. Because I find everybody's like, we all emotionally eat. Like, everybody's got, we all have it in us to go a little overboard here and there. But for those for whom it's more of an addictive habit, you can take this quiz and find out where you are on that
What a
spectrum
great
of emotional
idea.
eating. Yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous. I love what you said about the power of groups. Like, it is powerful. I used to do one-on-one coaching, and I've switched to entirely groups now because I
I
just
love
find it
that.
so much better when people understand they got a supported community. They hear the struggles that other people are having. They
Yes.
hear about the wins, which inspires them. It's so good.
It's
I love it.
nourishing.
Yeah. Okay, so the quiz, we'll have the link to the quiz. Also get a link to your TED Talk because that's really powerful
Great.
talk, Tricia.
Thank
And
you.
so I always end with one last question for the guests, and that is, because the show is called Wellness by Design, it's about intentional living, which I'm sure you can relate to. What would you say is a baby step someone could take today that's going to begin to initiate healing?
Um, I would say just notice your patterns.
Mm,
Just notice your patterns around food. For those who don't think they're an emotional eater, just notice. Like, just kind of notice. I like personally, I like eating 3 meals. I call it 3 meal magic, 3 meals with nothing in between. And it's not a diet, it's a way for me to start having feelings in between. And when I'm snacking all day long, I don't allow for those feelings. So even just trying a couple days of 3 meals with nothing in between,
mhm.
you'll notice when you typically would be eating. You'll have an impulse, like, it's a habit. You get up to go eat, and then you're like, oops, it's not mealtime. Like, you just a little experiment with 3 meals can help you notice, like, wow, like, I am typically snacking all day, typically leaning on food. So that's what I just, it's just noticing it, and starting there.
That's really powerful, and I think that's something a lot of people in my audience will really appreciate. That the not snacking, and then noticing, okay, at those times when you are going to snack, what's really going on? What's really driving that? Getting that awareness. That is beautiful, Trisha. I love it. Okay, what's your website, and where can people find you on social media?
The website is healyourhunger.com, HEAL, healyourhunger.com. And the quiz is front and center right there. You can take that 3 minute quiz and find out whether you're an emotional eater or a food addict, or where you fall in between. And actually, I think my TED Talk's on there as well, so people
Okay,
can access the TED Talk too.
good, good. And I know you're on
And my
Instagram.
book. And my book too. And Instagram is a whole nother thing. Yeah. So
I
I have
love
some,
your Instagram.
thank you. I have some goofy videos about binge eating on my Instagram, which is Tricia Nelson _, at the end of the N in Nelson.
I love it because you're so funny. You get your sort of like getting this vacant look while you're digging into
Yeah.
foods, and I mean, it's so people can
Yep.
relate to that, right? Like how many of us have been there and done that. So you're just so funny. I love it. It's quite entertaining, but
Thank
also you're
you.
getting a message across too, right? So I love it.
Hope so. Thank you.
Tricia, thank you so much for being a guest on Wellness by Design today. I'm really excited to share your message with people and to help them get control of these food addictions so that they can really regain their life and freedom.
Thank you so much for having me, Jane. I love your work and I love what you're doing for people to up-level their health. So it's a
Aw.
pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. And to the people listening or watching, hope you and know that you've enjoyed this and got something out of it. But you may also know someone else who is an emotional eater, and perhaps you could share this with them. And really, you're doing them a favor because it's all about gaining freedom and the freedom to be the real you and live the life you're meant to live. So, thank you so much for being here and have a great day. I'll see you again next week.